Olivia, why is your $800,000 trust fund empty? My grandmother's voice cut through the birthday chatter like a knife through butter. I froze, fork halfway to my mouth, chocolate cake crumbling onto my plate. The restaurant went silent. Every head at our table turned toward me, then toward my parents. My mother's face went pale. My father shifted in his seat, suddenly fascinated by his napkin. Heat crawled up my neck as 50 questions exploded in my brain at once. What trust fund? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Grandma's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. The one your grandfather set up before he died. The one that should have $800,000 in it for your 21st birthday. She looked at my parents. You did tell her about it, didn't you? The silence that followed felt like drowning. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my family shattered into a million pieces. My name is Olivia Henderson, and this is the day I learned my parents had been lying to me my entire life. I pushed back from the table so hard my chair scraped against the floor. Everyone stared, but I didn't care. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Olivia, wait, my mother started, reaching for my arm. I jerked away. Don't touch me. The words came out sharp, cold, nothing like my usual voice. My father stood up, his face red. This isn't the place for this discussion. You're right, I said, backing toward the door. Because apparently, we've never had this discussion. 21 years, and you never thought to mention I had $800,000? My mother's expression shifted from panic to something harder. You're overreacting. We can explain everything. But I was already walking away, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the restaurant noise around me. Behind me, Grandma's voice rose, angry and sharp, but I couldn't stay. If I stayed, I'd scream. If I stayed, I'd fall apart completely. Outside, the cool air hit my face like a slap. I leaned against the brick wall, trying to breathe, trying to think. Back in my apartment, I tore through every document I owned. Bank statements, tax forms, anything with my name on it. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness as I logged into every account I'd ever opened. Nothing. No mention of any trust fund. No mysterious deposits. No letters from lawyers or banks. I called my bank's customer service line, hands still trembling. I need to know if there are any accounts in my name that I might not know about. The woman on the phone was patient but firm. I can only see the accounts you've opened with us, ma'am. If there's a trust fund, it would be held by a trustee, usually through a separate financial institution. After she hung up, I sat in the dark, staring at my phone. Who were my parents? The people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to be honest, who'd preached integrity at every turn, had they stolen from me? My phone buzzed. Mom calling. I declined it. Then Dad. Declined. Then Mom again. I turned off my phone and cried until my eyes burned. The next morning, I drove to Grandma's house. She answered the door in her robe, eyes tired but alert. I knew you'd come. Inside, she made tea while I sat at her kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework as a kid, where I'd learned to bake cookies, where everything had felt safe. Tell me everything, I said. Grandma sighed, her hands wrapped around her mug. Your grandfather set up the trust when you were born. He'd made good investments over the years, wanted to make sure you'd have a secure start in life. The fund was supposed to be untouchable until you turned 21. But it's gone. I checked with the bank yesterday after you left. The account's been drained over the past 5 years. Small withdrawals at first, then larger ones. All authorized by your parents as trustees. My stomach twisted. They stole it. I don't know if they meant to. Grandma, they took $800,000 that wasn't theirs and never told me it existed. That's stealing. She looked away, and I saw something in her face that made my blood run cold. You knew, didn't you? You suspected. Grandma's silence was confirmation enough. She set down her mug, her hands shaking slightly. I suspected something was wrong about 2 years ago. Your mother kept making excuses about why they needed money, medical bills, house repairs, your father's business. I offered to help, but she always refused. So you did nothing? The words came out harsher than I meant. I was afraid, she admitted quietly. Afraid of tearing the family apart. Afraid I was wrong. Your mother is my daughter, Olivia. I wanted to believe her. I understood, but it still hurt. Another person who could have protected me, who chosen silence instead. There's something else, Grandma said. Your father might not have been the driving force. I've seen how your mother handles him, how she makes decisions, and he just goes along. I'm not excusing him, but I think he was pressured. It didn't change anything, but it gave me a thread to pull. If Dad was the weaker link, maybe I could use that. I need documents, I said. Everything you have about the trust fund. Bank statements, the original setup papers, anything. Grandma nodded and stood. I'll get them. I spent the next 3 days locked in my apartment, surrounded by papers and spreadsheets. My laptop became my war room, every tab a different piece of the puzzle. The trust fund had been established with $200,000 initially, meant to grow over time through careful investments. By my calculations, it should have been worth close to $850,000 by now. Instead, it had zero. The withdrawals started small 5 years ago, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Things that could be explained away. But in the last 2 years, they'd gotten bolder. $50,000. $75,000. The final withdrawal, 6 months ago, had been $120,000. My mother had signed every authorization form. My father's signature appeared on later ones, always beneath hers, always smaller, like an afterthought. I was building a case without even meaning to. Every bank statement, every forged justification letter, every lie they told the trustees, it was all evidence. My phone rang. Mom again. I turned it back on but hadn't answered any of their calls. This time, I did. Olivia, we need to talk about this rationally, my mother said, her voice smooth and controlled. Okay. Let's talk about how you stole $800,000 from me. My mother's voice never wavered. That money was meant to help the family. You benefited from it too. Do you think your college tuition paid itself? My scholarships paid for college, I shot back. And my part-time jobs covered the rest. Don't you dare pretend you used that money on me. You're being ungrateful, she said, ice creeping into her tone. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? By accusing us of theft? I'm not accusing. I have bank statements. Silence. Then, carefully, those statements don't tell the whole story. There were family emergencies, investments that needed capital. Your grandfather would have understood. Then why didn't you tell me? Another pause. You were too young to understand these things. We were protecting you from adult worries. I laughed, bitter and sharp. I'm 21 now. When exactly were you planning to mention it? We were going to tell you when the time was right. The time was right when I turned 21. That's what Grandpa intended. Instead, you emptied it and hoped I'd never find out. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore. From anger. Pure, focused anger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation, every time my parents had praised me for being financially responsible, while they drained my future. Every time they talked about the importance of honesty while lying straight to my face. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it, my mother's voice drifting up from downstairs. I'd fallen asleep at Grandma's house, too exhausted to drive home. I crept to the top of the stairs and listened. She's digging into everything, my mother hissed into her phone. We need to move the remaining assets before she figures out about the house. My blood went cold. What house? I don't care what it takes, she continued. That money kept us afloat when your business failed. She doesn't understand what we've been through. We'll make her understand, or we'll make sure she can't touch anything else. I recorded the conversation on my phone, hand steady despite my racing heart. Every word was another nail in her coffin. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't conflicted. She was scheming to hide even more from me. When she hung up, I slipped back to the guest room, my mind racing with new questions. The next morning at breakfast, I tested the waters. Grandma made pancakes while I sat at the counter, casual as I could manage. Mom mentioned something about Dad's business failing, I said lightly. When did that happen? Grandma paused mid-flip. About 4 years ago. He invested in some tech startup that went under. Lost a significant amount. How much? I'm not sure exactly. Your mother never gave details. I nodded, filing that away. And they didn't ask you for help? Your mother's always been proud. She'd rather struggle than admit she needs assistance. Or steal from her own daughter, I thought. Later, I drove past my parents' house, the one I'd grown up in. It was a nice place, recently renovated. New windows, fresh paint, landscaped yard. Renovations that must have cost a fortune. I pulled up the property records on my phone. The house had been refinanced 3 years ago. Around the same time the trust fund withdrawals had increased. My father was in the garage when I pulled into the driveway. He looked up, startled, then wary. Olivia. I didn't expect you. We need to talk, Dad. Alone. My father led me into his workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and the smell of sawdust. He'd always been more comfortable here than anywhere else, building things with his hands instead of dealing with problems. I know about the business, I said. The startup that failed. His face crumpled. Olivia, you have to understand. I understand you used my money to cover your losses. It wasn't like that, he said quickly. Your mother said we could borrow from the trust temporarily, just until we got back on our feet. We were going to pay it back. But you didn't. The debts kept piling up. The house needed repairs. Your mother's car died. Everything hit at once, and suddenly we were in too deep. He sat heavily on his workbench. I know it was wrong. I knew it then, but your mother convinced me you'd never need to know. That we'd replace it before you turned 21. But you didn't replace it. You took more. He nodded miserably. I'm weak, Olivia. I've always been weak when it comes to your mother. She makes plans, and I just follow. Despite my anger, I felt a flicker of pity. He wasn't innocent, but he wasn't the mastermind either. I need to know everything, Dad. Every account, every withdrawal, every lie. If you help me, I'll remember that. If you don't. I left the threat hanging. He looked at me with something like relief, as if he'd been waiting for someone to finally hold him accountable. Armed with my father's information, I contacted a lawyer specializing in trust law. Her name was Victoria Pierce, and she came highly recommended by one of my college professors. This is straightforward theft, she said after reviewing my documents. Your parents had a fiduciary duty as trustees. They violated that duty repeatedly. Can I get the money back? We can certainly try. We'll need to freeze any remaining assets they might have, file a claim against them legally, and potentially pursue criminal charges if necessary. Criminal charges. Against my own parents. The thought made me sick, but I nodded. Do it. This will get messy, Victoria warned. Family cases always do. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother's smug voice on the phone, about my father's weak excuses, about 21 years of lies. I'm prepared. The next day, my parents received a letter from Victoria's office. I wasn't there when they opened it, but my father called me an hour later. Olivia, please. Don't do this. We can work something out as a family. We stopped being a family the moment you stole from me, I said, and hung up. That afternoon, a court order froze my parents' accounts. No more hiding money. No more secret transfers. The war had officially begun. 2 weeks later, my aunt hosted a family barbecue. Everyone knew something was wrong, the tension was impossible to hide, but nobody wanted to address it directly. Except me. I waited until most of the family was gathered on the back porch, drinks in hand, the smell of grilled burgers in the air. Then I spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. I want to thank Grandma for telling me about my trust fund at my birthday dinner. I had no idea Grandpa had set aside $800,000 for me. Of course, I also had no idea my parents had emptied that account without telling me. The porch went silent. My mother's face flushed red. My father stared at his plate. Olivia, my mother hissed. This is neither the time nor the place. Isn't it? I smiled sweetly. You had no problem keeping secrets at family gatherings for years. I'm just being honest now. Isn't honesty important? My Uncle Paul set down his drink. Wait, they took your trust fund? Every cent, I confirmed. I've had to hire a lawyer to get it back. But I'm sure they had good reasons. Right, Mom? My mother stood abruptly. I won't be interrogated in front of the family. If you have accusations, take them to court. Oh, I already have, I said pleasantly. My lawyer filed the paperwork last week. The gasps around the porch were satisfying. My grandmother caught my eye and gave a small, approving nod. She'd known I was planning this, had even encouraged it. Sometimes, the truth needed an audience. That night, Grandma pulled me aside in her kitchen. I have something for you. She handed me a thick folder. Inside were financial statements dating back 25 years, every transaction, every investment decision, every report filed with the trust administrators. I kept copies of everything, she explained. Your grandfather insisted on detailed records. I never thought I'd need them for something like this, but here we are. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. This was better than anything I'd found on my own. Complete documentation, irrefutable proof. There's something else, Grandma said, pointing to a highlighted section. See this transfer from 3 years ago? $150,000 to a property investment company. I did some digging, that company bought a vacation house in the mountains. They bought a vacation house with my money? And listed it under a shell company so it wouldn't show up in normal property searches. But I have the deed information. It's in this folder. I looked at my grandmother with new respect. You've been investigating them. For 2 years, she admitted. I just needed you to be old enough to fight back. Now you are. She was right. I wasn't a helpless child anymore. I was an adult with evidence, legal representation, and a family member willing to testify on my behalf. The next morning, Victoria filed an amendment to our claim, adding the vacation property to the list of assets purchased with stolen funds. My mother called 5 minutes after she was served. I didn't answer. My mother's next move was psychological warfare. She started calling my extended family, painting me as ungrateful and vindictive. Some believed her. My cousin Kyle stopped returning my texts. My Aunt Diane sent me a long message about respecting your elders. But others saw through it. Uncle Paul called to offer support. My younger cousin Mia sent me screenshots of the family group chat, where my mother was spreading lies about me being mentally unstable. She's desperate, Victoria said when I showed her. Desperate people make mistakes. She was right. In her panic, my mother had emailed a family friend, a message Mia forwarded to me, detailing how she'd borrowed from my trust fund temporarily and planned to replace it before I noticed. It was a written confession. This is gold, Victoria said. She's admitting to unauthorized withdrawals and intent to deceive. The judge will love this. Meanwhile, I focused on gathering more evidence. I contacted the trust administrator, a stuffy bank in downtown, and requested complete records. They were reluctant at first, citing privacy, until Victoria sent them a legal demand. The records arrived a week later. 200 pages of transactions, authorizations, and correspondence. My parents had been sloppy, leaving paper trails everywhere. One letter caught my attention. It was from my mother to the administrator, dated 4 years ago. Given the family emergency, we need immediate access to $75,000 from Olivia's trust. She's been informed and consents. I'd never been informed. I'd never consented. It was fraud, plain and simple. The trust administrator's name was Gordon Matthews, and he looked nervous when I walked into his office with Victoria by my side. "Ms. Henderson," he said, standing awkwardly. "I assure you, we followed proper protocol." "You authorized withdrawals based on forged consent," Victoria interrupted. "That's not proper protocol. That's negligence." Gordon paled. "Your parents provided documentation." "Fake documentation," I said, sliding a folder across his desk. "I never signed any of these authorization forms. I never even knew the trust existed until 3 weeks ago." He opened the folder, his face growing whiter with each page. We had no reason to doubt their claims. They were the trustees. Trustees have a legal duty to act in the beneficiary's interest, Victoria said sharply. Not steal from them. Your bank facilitated that theft by failing to verify these authorizations independently. What do you want? Gordon asked quietly. Complete cooperation, Victoria replied. Every document, every communication, every red flag you ignored. And if we find you were complicit, we'll name the bank in our lawsuit. He nodded quickly. I'll have my assistant pull everything today. As we left, Victoria smiled. Banks hate liability. He'll give us everything we need to bury your parents' defense. She was right. By the end of the week, we had emails showing my mother had pressured Gordon to skip verification steps, claiming I was too young and emotional to be consulted directly. The preliminary hearing was set for Monday morning. I barely slept the night before, running through possible scenarios, preparing myself to face my parents in court. When I arrived, they were already there. My mother looked perfectly composed in a navy suit, her hair styled, her expression calm. My father looked sick, his tie slightly crooked, his eyes avoiding mine. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s named Judge Anderson. She reviewed our filings quickly, her expression giving nothing away. Ms. Henderson, she said, looking at me. You're claiming your parents, acting as trustees, misappropriated funds from your trust account? Yes, Your Honor. $800,000 over 5 years, without my knowledge or consent. She turned to my parents' lawyer, a slick-looking man named Howard Green. And your client's position? My clients acted within their rights as trustees to manage the fund for the family's benefit, Green said smoothly. Ms. Henderson was a beneficiary, but the fund was meant to support the entire family during financial hardship. That's not what the trust documents say, Victoria countered, handing the judge a copy. The fund was explicitly designated for Olivia's education and future security. There's no provision for general family use. Judge Anderson read in silence. Then she looked at my mother. Mrs. Henderson, did you inform your daughter about these withdrawals? My mother's composure cracked slightly. She was young. We didn't want to burden her with adult financial concerns. She turned 21 3 weeks ago, the judge said dryly. When were you planning to inform her? Silence. Motion granted, Judge Anderson said. All assets in question remain frozen pending full trial. Next hearing in 30 days. My mother's face went white. Outside the courtroom, I heard her voice rise in panic, but I didn't look back. Over the next 2 weeks, my life became a whirlwind of legal preparation. Victoria was thorough, interviewing potential witnesses, gathering expert testimony about fiduciary duty, building an airtight case. But I also focused on myself. I enrolled in a financial management course, determined to never be caught off guard again. I met with a career counselor about graduate school options. I wasn't just fighting for my money, I was fighting for my future. My father called one evening, his voice barely a whisper. Olivia, please. Your mother's falling apart. Can't we settle this privately? Did you replace the money? I asked. We don't have it. The house, the vacation property, everything's tied up in assets we can't liquidate quickly. Then sell them. That's our home. Where would we live? You should have thought about that before you stole from me, I said, and hung up. It sounds cold, but I'd run out of sympathy. They'd had options. They'd chosen theft. The next day, Victoria called with news. Your parents tried to transfer the vacation property to a friend's name. Luckily, our freeze caught it. The judge is not happy. What does that mean for us? It means they're desperate and making stupid mistakes. The judge sees them as untrustworthy now. That helps our case significantly. I smiled, but it felt hollow. Winning was important, but it didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't give me back the parents I thought I had. My father showed up at my apartment unannounced, looking haggard. I almost didn't let him in, but something in his face made me pause. 5 minutes, I said, leaving the door open. He sat on my couch, head in his hands. Your mother convinced me this was the right thing. That we'd pay it back before you knew, that we were protecting you from adult stress. He looked up, eyes red. I was a coward. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't have the strength to stop her. You had 21 years to tell me the truth. I know. His voice cracked. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know. I'm sorry. Genuinely, deeply sorry. And I'm going to testify on your behalf. I stared at him. What? I've already told Victoria. I'll testify about every withdrawal, every lie, every time your mother pressured me to sign documents. I'll tell the truth, even if it means prison. Mom's going to kill you. She already has, he said quietly. She hasn't spoken to me in 3 days. We're sleeping in separate rooms. Our marriage is over, Olivia. The least I can do is help you get justice. After he left, I sat in silence, processing. My father's betrayal had wounded me deeply, but his willingness to make amends meant something. It didn't erase what he'd done, but it was a start. Victoria was pleased when I told her. A cooperative witness who's also a defendant? That's extremely valuable. His testimony will be devastating to your mother's defense. The full trial began on a cold Monday in November. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and formal. My mother sat at the defendant's table, her lawyer beside her. My father sat separately, with his own attorney, a sign that he'd officially broken ranks. Victoria presented our case methodically. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. Forged authorization forms. Gordon Matthews's testimony about my mother's pressure to skip verification. Expert witnesses explaining fiduciary duty and breach of trust. Then came my father. He walked to the witness stand slowly, not looking at my mother. Under oath, he confessed everything. The failed business. The decision to borrow from my trust. My mother's assurance that I'd never find out. The escalating withdrawals as their debts grew. Did you believe you were doing the right thing? Victoria asked. No, he said quietly. I knew it was wrong. I was just too weak to stop it. And did Olivia know about any of these withdrawals? No. My wife insisted we keep it secret. She said Olivia was too young to understand financial complexity. My mother's lawyer tried to discredit him on cross-examination, painting him as a bitter husband turning on his wife. But the evidence backed up every word he'd said. When my mother took the stand, she was defensive and cold. I acted in what I believed was the family's best interest, she insisted. Even though the trust specifically designated the funds for Olivia? Victoria pressed. Family means supporting each other through hardship. Did you ask Olivia if she wanted to support you by giving up her entire inheritance? She was a child. She turned 18 3 years ago. She's been an adult for 3 years. Why didn't you tell her then? My mother's composure finally cracked. Because she wouldn't have understood. She's naive, idealistic, she would have refused, and we would have lost everything. The courtroom went silent. Victoria smiled slightly. So you knew she'd refuse, which means you knew she hadn't consented. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. No further questions. The judge's ruling came 2 days later. I sat in the courtroom, hands clenched, as Judge Anderson read her decision. The evidence shows clear, deliberate misappropriation of trust funds by Mrs. Henderson, aided by Mr. Henderson's complicity. The trustees violated their fiduciary duty repeatedly and intentionally concealed their actions from the beneficiary. She looked directly at my mother. Your claims that you acted in the family's interest are contradicted by the trust documents and by your own testimony. You knew Ms. Olivia Henderson would not have consented to these withdrawals, which is precisely why you hid them from her. My mother's face was stone. I'm ordering full restitution of $800,000, plus interest and legal fees, to be paid by liquidating all assets purchased with the stolen funds. This includes the vacation property, the home refinancing proceeds, and any other assets traceable to the trust. My father closed his eyes in relief. My mother stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. Trustees who betray their duty to this extent deserve more than civil penalties. As we filed out of the courtroom, my mother finally looked at me. Her eyes were hard, unrepentant. I hope you're happy, she said coldly. You've destroyed your family. No, I said quietly. You did that yourself. The house sold within a month, the same house I'd grown up in, where I'd had birthday parties and learned to ride a bike. Watching strangers walk through it during open houses felt surreal, but I didn't let myself feel guilty. The vacation property sold next, bringing in more than expected. Combined with the liquidation of other assets, the full $800,000 was restored to my trust fund within 60 days, plus an additional $150,000 in interest and penalties. My father moved into a small apartment. We talked occasionally, cautious conversations where we both avoided certain topics. He was trying to rebuild his life, and I respected that. Forgiveness would take time, but I no longer hated him. My mother refused to speak to me. According to family members, she blamed me for everything, the divorce, the financial ruin, the public humiliation. She created a narrative where she was the victim and I was the ungrateful daughter. I didn't care anymore. Her version of events didn't change the truth. Grandma threw me a small celebration dinner, just the two of us. We clinked glasses over pasta, and she smiled. Your grandfather would be proud. He always said you were strong. I didn't feel strong, I admitted. I felt angry and scared. That's what strength is, she said. Doing what's right even when you're terrified. News of the case spread through our community. Some people sided with my parents, calling me cold and vindictive. Others praised me for standing up for myself. At a coffee shop one afternoon, a woman I didn't know approached me. You're Olivia Henderson, right? I just wanted to say thank you. I blinked, surprised. For what? My daughter's in a similar situation. Her father took money from her college fund, and she was afraid to say anything because family doesn't sue family. Your case gave her courage to fight back. She walked away before I could respond, but her words stayed with me. My fight hadn't just been about money, it had been about refusing to accept betrayal as normal. About showing other people they didn't have to either. Over the next few months, I received messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family financial abuse. Some asked for advice. Others just wanted to vent. I listened, offered resources when I could, and felt a strange sense of purpose forming. Maybe this wasn't just my story. Maybe it was bigger than that. 6 months after the trial, I used a portion of my restored trust fund to pay off my student loans. The rest I invested carefully, working with a financial advisor Grandma recommended. I also started a blog called Trust Betrayed, sharing my story and resources for others dealing with family financial abuse. It gained followers quickly, people hungry for information, for validation, for proof they weren't alone. Victoria Pierce agreed to write guest posts about legal protections. Gordon Matthews, surprisingly, contributed an article about red flags banks should watch for. Even my father wrote a piece titled Confessions of a Failed Trustee, which went viral. The blog became more than I'd expected. I started receiving speaking invitations, financial literacy workshops, college seminars, legal conferences. My story became a cautionary tale and an empowerment narrative simultaneously. Meanwhile, my mother faced criminal charges. The district attorney pursued fraud and embezzlement counts. She pleaded guilty to avoid trial, receiving 2 years probation and mandatory restitution counseling. I didn't attend her sentencing. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. My father and I met for coffee monthly now. Our relationship was different, more honest, less performative. He'd started therapy and was working with a financial counselor to rebuild his credit. "I'm proud of you," he said during one visit. "You're stronger than I ever was." "I learned from your mistakes," I replied, not unkindly. He nodded, accepting that. That's all I can hope for. A year after Grandma's question at my birthday dinner, I celebrated my 22nd birthday very differently. Small gathering, close friends, Grandma at the head of the table. To Olivia, she toasted, raising her glass. Who didn't let anyone define her worth? We drank, and I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe. Or just the absence of constant anger. My trust fund sat safely in my control now, carefully managed and growing steadily. I'd used some for school, some for investments, some to help friends in need, choices I made freely, without manipulation or lies. The blog continued to grow. I'd connected with nonprofit organizations working on financial literacy and elder abuse prevention. There was talk of turning my story into a longer resource guide. But more than any of that, I'd reclaimed something my parents had taken, my sense of self. For years, I'd been who they wanted me to be, compliant, trusting, easily controlled. Now I was someone new. Someone who asked questions, demanded answers, and refused to accept betrayal as normal. Late that night, scrolling through messages from blog readers, I found one that made me stop. I confronted my uncle about my grandfather's estate today. He tried to lie, but I had documents ready. Because of your story, I knew I could fight back. Thank you for showing me I wasn't alone. I smiled and replied, you were never alone. And you were always strong enough. You just needed permission to believe it. 2 years after my 21st birthday, I graduated with my master's degree in financial planning. Grandma sat in the front row, beaming. My father attended too, clapping loudly when they called my name. My mother wasn't there. I'd sent an invitation, more out of obligation than hope, but she hadn't responded. According to my father, she'd moved to a different state, starting over where nobody knew her story. I felt nothing about that, no sadness, no relief. She'd made her choices, and I'd made mine. We were done. After graduation, I accepted a job with a nonprofit helping low-income families navigate financial systems. The work was meaningful, using my experience to help others avoid similar betrayals. Trust.